Welcome, everybody. Another episode of Heavy Metallurgy. 159 Fridays. That's pretty sweet. How you doing, Alan?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Marty?
Doing well. Good week, busy week. A lot of fun. Got some yard work done, some work done. It's all good. Everything's good. How about you?
About the same. It's kind of rainy, so we got some yard work done. Not all of it, but we'll just have to catch up on the rest a bit later. So yeah, weather's back and forth, but just trying to stay on top of a lot of different little projects right now. Hope everybody watching and tuning in is having a good week, good weekend as well, if you're watching this after the fact. And yeah, not too much news at this point, but Marty, I think you've got a list of some releases that came out today that you wanted to shout out.
I do, and I'm sure we're going to have maybe a lesser crowd tonight because the Milwaukee Metal Fest is happening right now, I believe.
Okay.
So that's a thing. But let us get into this thing here. That thing. Nope, that's not what I want. There we go. New releases for today, Friday, May 17th. We've got Bat, Under the Crooked Claw, out on Nuclear Blast. Botanist, Paleobotany, out on Prophecy. Demon. I'm wondering if that is the Demon, though, the old school band Demon. Name of that album is Invincible. It's on Frontiers.
It could be. That's the kind of band that could be on Frontiers.
Yeah. Gatecreeper, Dark Superstition, out on Nuclear Blast. Godin, which is former members of the band Winter. They just put out their second album, I believe, Veil of the Fallen, on Svart.
Yep, very much in the Winter kind of style.
Yep. I've been meaning to maybe sit down and review that. I just haven't got there yet. Kerry King, From Hell I Rise, on Raining Phoenix, the much bandied about album.
Yep, that one's been talked about quite a bit lately.
Nocturnus AD, Unicursal, out on Profound Lore, which our guest this evening, Sue, will be reviewing here soon. Pain, Peter Tagrin's more gothy metal project, is out with I Am on Nuclear Blast. And Pallbearer, Mine Burns Alive, on Nuclear Blast. A lot of Nuclear Blast stuff coming out today. I guess, it's good to be king, right?
Yep. Yeah, I haven't listened to Pallbearer in quite a while, so be interesting to see what they're up to if I get a chance to check that one out.
Yeah. But without further ado, she's waiting in the wings. Let's get her out here. Sue Verica, everybody. Welcome back, Sue.
Hello.
Good to have you back again, of course.
Thank you for having me.
What's been going on?
Well, I've just been busy with work, and my daughter is finishing up senior year of high school, so we're gearing up for graduation and getting her ready for college. And
oh my God.
It's quite a time.
How did this happen?
There whatsoever.
How did this happen?
It happened so fast.
Yeah, I know. My kid's 14 and starting to look at thinking about driver's training. I'm like, oh no, I'm not ready for that.
yeah, that's a lot of fun.
He forgets to flush the toilet. I don't know how he's going to do driving. Here we go. But yeah, well, cool. Sounds like everything's going in a good direction for you over there, I should say. And we have gathered here tonight to talk about a band that started in 1968, UFO. Where did they start? I know it's England. From London. They're from London. Yeah. Hopefully someone here knows their history a little better than I do, because I'm new to this. So, Sue, do you want to go first on a little bit of info about UFO?
Sure.
Having talked to the band in the past?
I interviewed the one and only Pete Way, so their bass player extraordinaire. It's really interesting with him. He's a great musician, a great songwriter. But by the time he was in his, 50s, 60s, whatever, his brain was like gone, So the interview with him was so choppy and all over the place that I had to do a Frankenstein to make it make sense. So, and then I had gone to that Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles festival in Cleveland in 2003. And Pete did not an acoustic set, but like a solo set as a side show for that event. And he was playing songs that he's played for the last 40 years, and he couldn't remember the words or anything. So
There's iconic pictures of him with his bass behind the stage doing lines of coke off a stack of amps and stuff like that. So I mean, thugs
Yeah,
will
that
catch up with you after a while.
they will.
Yeah.
And anybody though who's read about all of the pranks and things that UFO used to do on the road, it's just hilarious what they did to Rush and other bands. It's just amazing.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Pete had a reputation, as a very heavy partier, even by the standards of '70s hard rock bands.
Hmm.
There's lots of quotes from people like Ozzy, who was just like, "Yeah, I didn't even try to keep up with that guy when it came to substances," and just like,
That's saying
wait,
something.
what?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, right here, James, the Bay Area thrash movement, the dudes in Exodus were very inspired and influenced by UFO.
Oh yeah,
Kirk and Gary Holt kind of bonded over UFO. So I mean, which listening to their catalog kind of blows me away a little bit, but yeah, there's no understating how important they were for sure.
yeah.
Of
they were
course,
a
they're
huge- oh, go
Steve
ahead.
Harris's favorite band too, as far as I know.
Yeah, they were a huge influence on that whole generation of '80s heavy metal musicians. Michael Schenker, for the guitarists, of course. But yeah, you go back and read all those interviews with any like new wave of British heavy metal band or early '80s metal band, and when they're asked like oh, who are your favorite bands? Who are your influences? You always see UFO pop up. At the same time, Marty, you're not the only person who's never really delved into the band in a lot of detail. They're always one of those bands people never quite get around to. So yeah, they're always seem to be a little bit unsung, even though they're a well-known entity. They're kind of an odd designation that way, in this weird little category where they don't quite get the respect they deserve these days, even though everybody seems to know who they are. They haven't faded to obscurity, just people don't check them out. So dude, why do you think there's a particular reason for that? Is there a reason they tend to slip through the cracks for a lot of listeners?
Well, for some reason, they never got radio airplay. Other than like, I think they were popular in Chicago, like in the Midwest there. But here in the Northeast, they never caught on. And, important markets like that, like New York and California, they just never really got the traction that they needed. I kind of compare it to Thin Lizzy, where they have their really like hardcore following, but they just never made it to the mainstream, I guess. I think Michael Schenker was actually more popular with MSG and got a bigger name for himself that way, and his notoriety with the Scorpions too. And that kind of gave UFO a little bit more recognition here in the United States. But they were always huge in England. I know that. So,
Which is odd because no one ever likes the local band. The local band's often overlooked for what else is out there,
right.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, the Thin Lizzy comparison's a good point, Sue, because they both are playing in a generally similar style. That mid and late '70s hard rock. Their main kind of peak era is right there in the mid to late '70s. They both put out a string of really albums that kind of nail that sound down. But you're right. At the same time, neither of them ever really quite got to be top tier, selling out 100,000 seats overnight kind of band. They were both toured a lot. They were consistent, and like you said, they both definitely had their fan base and did well. But they were never going to be like the stadium or arena headlining act. Like UFO very famously was always the opening act.
Yes,
a good opening act, but it was always UFO opening for Deep Purple or UFO opening for Rush or something else. Yeah, it was never the other way around.
Well, for me as an outsider looking in, I mean, I've got Forsyth, of course, have that. And recently, I haven't even listened to this yet. I got for $3. I know this isn't in the realm of what we're covering.
Yeah.
Today, but and as an outsider looking in and hearing a lot of these albums this week for the first time, I would say, you look at like bands that were happening around the same time UFO were. Iron Maiden. Let's just throw that out there. Iron Maiden had a distinct style that they reveled in their entire career. I listened to the UFO stuff as we're going to get into this album by album.
Mm-hmm.
They really struggled to put out an album that was consistent from start to finish.
Yeah.
And that hurts. So
Mm-hmm.
I think they shined at rocking,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't rock that often. I mean, even they'd have a couple really good rockers on each album, but then a lot of mid-pace
Mm-hmm.
and then some show tuney type stuff and some ballad shit. They would just they'd sink the momentum on almost every record. They get a good momentum going, and then they'd sink it with something stupid. And I'm just like,
Right.
maybe this is one of the reasons why, so many people. I mean, I heard for the first time UFO on Sirius XM radio. They play Lights Out all the time, and that's a great song, probably the best song they ever did. And why didn't they do more of that?
Well, that's a good point too. Is the reason that most people like the live album more than any of the studio albums is because it rocks from start to finish.
Yeah.
Whereas on every single studio album, they have at least one sappy ballad. They're not even power
Multiple
ballads.
sometimes.
They're like
Yeah,
really
they're weird.
sappy. I
Yeah.
know. So I have to say that's definitely a mark off of their body of work.
Which
I will
is
push
funny.
back a little bit on that, actually,
Go ahead.
just because, I mean, you're right. There's variation, and there's at least one song on every album I don't like. At the same time, in that era, I mean, that was perfectly normal. I mean, it was actually very odd through a lot of those mid '70s years to put out an album that was nothing but bangers. That really started more with like late '70s Judas Priest, Hellbent for Leather, and moving into the first Iron Maiden albums in like '80 and '81. You look at a lot of those '70s bands, that were hard rock or early heavy metal. They often have a wide variety of stuff. Even Thin Lizzy, often had the ballad. They'd have the slower bluesy influenced songs, along with the rockers. Mountain would have all kinds of everything from rockers to blues songs to very laid back, dreamy psychedelic stuff. Budgie's catalog is the same way. '70s bands, I don't know if it's just that they tended to be more creative, or they just tried to cover a bigger range, or they were also, they had chances to get radio exposure, so that if they could hit the right catchy tune or the right ballad, there wasn't, they could shoot up the charts with it back then. Iron Maiden, those kind of bands, they were never really concerned with that. They weren't going to score a chart hit. So they just streamlined, and all the songs became metal. So I don't think it's a huge strike against UFO that they had that variety on the albums. It's what bands did at the time. But yeah, at the same time, it does mean there's always going to be a song or two on any album that you just don't like, probably, because you're going to I like this style and this style, but I don't like it when they do this thing over here.
Another thing too, I mean, they being out live, they saw what worked live. So I mean, this Strangers in the Night, they curated a great live set. So they knew how to curate live what works. On the album, it just didn't work for me. And another thing that I think about UFO, as much as I like the singing, I love the guitar playing, I love the guitar tone, they're very vanilla. Their presentation is very vanilla, especially when they're going between these different their hard rock, even their hard rock and stuff. It's good, it's got a great sound, a great tone, but it's very safe. They're a very safe sounding band to me, anyway. I end up liking a lot of this stuff, but just about every album's frustrating one way or the other. But maybe that's why bands like Maiden or Thin Lizzy. Say what you want about Thin Lizzy, they did the same thing with the ballads and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it was a very charismatic frontman who had a very charismatic voice. Phil Mogg, is that how you say his last name? He's got a great voice, very good voice. He's got a pretty clean singing voice, but it's very safe. He's not stepping outside of his, whereas Dio was safe, but still Dio had a very distinct style, I don't know. I think there's a lot of things stacked against UFO. I don't think they suck. I just wanted to, I really wanted a come to Jesus moment with this band. I really did. I was hoping for it because I mean, I listen to a lot of the stuff. I'm like, on paper, it all looks good, but anyway, we'll get into that when we get going. Anyway.
Yeah. The one thing with Mogg, though, too, he doesn't. Oh yes, always. Like he's not like a firecracker on album or anything, but there's a strong comparison with him and Phil Lynott. They both have a similar approach, and actually, Sue put it very well in a old review she did back in. I pulled this out of the old zine box. This is Metal Maniacs from right around the turn of the century. Sue wrote a really nice 2-page synopsis. Metal Maniacs would do a thing around this time where they would pick like one sort of vintage band and do kind of a retrospective about them so that fans could maybe check out some of the older acts. And yeah, Sue had a nice write-up about him. And the way she described Mog's singing was the band really focused on these kind of wayfarers' tales of lonely and lost souls, which is exactly what Lynott does in a lot of his songwriting as well. So there's another comparison. We mentioned some comparisons to Lizzie a minute ago, and there's another one there that they source some of the same material that Mog was really good at those songs where he's kind of has this slightly sad, wistful, melancholy thing about these characters that are drifting through life. And then Lizzie would push that same button over and over. So another thing that they do similarly, they just obviously Lynott's maybe more charismatic in his delivery, whereas Mog gets that kind of wistful and dreamy thing, but it works very well for him.
I happen to really love Phil Mogg's voice.
It's a great voice.
It's really different too. It doesn't sound like anybody else. I can hear a couple notes and know it's him, and nobody else has really imitated him. So I like that about it. I like his delivery. He's got a different type of vibrato than other singers do. And I find his voice like comforting or something. It's hard to explain, but and another thing to remember is that this whole body of work was in the 70s, whereas Iron Maiden really came into being in the 80s, and people just had different mindsets in those decades.
True.
So you can't exactly compare them.
True.
And the Scorpions had a very similar trajectory too through their 70s material with Eli Roth. So
someone just mentioned that about the Scorpions in the chat a minute ago. Oh, and just a quick note to folks in the chat, my chat features acting squirrely, so if I'm not posting or responding to stuff in the chat like I normally do, apologies, but when I'm trying to do it, it is really slowing my computer down for some reason tonight, so I'll probably will stay out of the chat a lot more than I typically do. But and one thing you really see with when you dive into UFO fans and reviews and stuff is always that same sentiment you just made, Sue, that Mog has a very unique voice, even though he doesn't have an incredible range. He's not covering octaves or anything. At the same time, even very hardcore fans of 70s hard rock and metal, it's like, I can't think of anybody who sounds like him.
Right.
You see that same comment over and over. So it's maybe a little understated, but it's a very cool, unique voice, and the delivery is really good for the material they do.
And Aaron has a good point here. I came to love UFO when I learned to stop expecting them to sound like Priest. See, part of this is me wanting them to be something they obviously weren't going to be. And the songs, when they're on, to me, they're really on. But when they're, I don't know, they go into some weird tangents, and they did it a lot. They would always sync a rocking song with a pseudo ballad. It's like, God, really? Third song in, you're playing a ballad? What? Build that momentum, and then midway point, then put a ballad. Don't. But little things like that, it would just drive me nuts. It just drives me nuts.
It's a sign of the times, and again, a lot of their ballads are actually quite good if you're okay with ballads. Some of them aren't, but we'll get to those as we work our way through the albums.
Which we might as well get going on. Sue, why don't you start off with the first album, UFO 1, came out in 1970. Up. There it is.
All right. So you have to look at it as a tale of two UFOs, too. UFO 1 and 2 were space rock albums written by a different lineup. It was Phil with Pete and a guitarist named Mick Bolton, who is not the crooner with the mullet. And he's also not the guy who's recently passed away, who was in like some other 70s band. I forget. He is still alive, and but he's not really playing music these days. But he was the guitar player in the band for those albums. And I can't recall who the drummer was, but so as a space rock band, like if you take it for what it is, when you're listening to UFO one, it's actually a really good album, and the songs are like, you know, pretty memorable, and I thought it was a well done record. They have a song in there called Boogie for George, which is a really great track.
Mhm.
And my husband John loves it. So there's also 3 covers on the album. There's Come On Everybody, which of course was Eddie Cochran. There's Come Away Melinda, and Who Do You Love? And
Bo
it
Diddley.
opens. What's that?
Bo Diddley cover.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
It opens with the instrumental Unidentified Flying Object, which was a great way for them to start their recording career. But overall, like going back and listening to it recently, I really enjoyed it a lot more than I used to in the past.
What'd you rank that one at?
Out of the 8 albums that we're talking about today, it would be number 7.
All right. Alan, UFO 1.
Yeah, Sue's described it pretty well. This album, does take a lot of flack from folks because it sounds nothing like the Michael Schenker era UFO. Like she said, it's a tale of 2 bands, and these first 2 albums are pre-Schenker, so the band's doing other stuff. This is a band that's forming in the late 60s. They're already playing. They take their name actually from the famous UFO club in London that Pink Floyd was the opening band the day the club opened, and UFO was kind of on that scene. So it's very early stuff. This album, a lot of the songs are kind of rough around the edges. This is a young band. They're trying to find a direction. There's a lot of good ideas on this album, but the album, doesn't really have a direction to it yet. If you listen to this wanting to hear, classic 70s hard rock stuff, you are not going to like it. You're going to be in for a big shock. This album, actually, to me, the closest thing I can think of as a comparison, it sounds a lot more like early Blue Cheer, circa Vince Bus Eruption. It's actually got that kind of bigger, heavier, kind of fuzzed out 70s rock sound to it. It's got very prominent bass, that's kind of very bubbly through a lot of the tracks. It's that kind of almost proto, sometimes I've heard people refer to as like bonehead metal from the early 70s. These kind of garage bands that are more interested in volume and distortion and fuzz, not so much on really trying to cobble together a really strong song structure. But yeah, and there are a lot of fun songs on it. Things like the Come On Everybody, the Eddie Cochran cover, which again, Blue Cheer also went to Eddie Cochran for their kind of big song with Summertime Blues. That may not appeal to a lot of folks these days. As somebody that grew up listening to a lot of like Eddie Cochran and rockabilly stuff with my dad, those kind of songs connect with me pretty well. Shake It About is a really good one. It's slow, it's bluesy, it's a little raunchy. It's got this huge, just kind of fat bottom end sound to it. If you like that really heavy, fuzzy stuff, then this is an album that you should check out. Shake It About has an incredibly hilarious lyric in it where, again, he's like talking, to a woman or something. It's like, the line is, you were a brownie and I was a scout.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, there you go. So bad it's good, I guess. But yeah, the cover of Come Away Melinda is actually done pretty nicely. Looking at what else is on here, Timothy is kind of fun. Follow You Home is another one that just has that kind of. There's a little bit of psych in there. Again, a time and place from where they're at. They're on that London scene with those other bands like I mentioned. Then I'm not a huge fan of the Bo Diddley remake. I like his version a lot. This one is a little too laid back to work. The Closer Evil is also kind of good. Yeah, so again, it shows some promise. It's they're kind of they're very young. They're kind of in that garage phase. They're trying out a bunch of stuff. I get why people don't like the album a ton. but I think they come at it expecting something that is just not meant to be. It is not meant to be, Phenomenon 2 or Lights Out 2. It's a different lineup. It's a different era. You're years before that stuff's going to happen. But yeah, if you like those, weirder, fuzzier bands, the Sir Lord Baltimores or the Leaf Hounds, UFO 1 might be something to check out. It is an album that has its fan base. There are people out there that do like it and appreciate it for what it is. You just have to understand, what it is you're trying to wrangle. So where did I rank this one? It doesn't rank very high, to be fair. I would give the album like a B- kind of grade. I enjoy it, but I recognize it has its problems. Out of these, where is my ranking page? Oh, I've got it ranked. We've got 8 albums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have it ranked then 7th out of the 8th.
All right. Well, this is the first time hearing this album this week. Primitive rock with space rock elements. Recorded the old-fashioned way with guitars panned hard right and the bass is hard left, which is weird. Then they would mess with the panning here and there, which kind of, gives you a little off-center feel. But it gives it a recording like this gives it a garagey feel. The lyrics are bad, based on Boogie Woogie and other attempts at party anthems. And coming out with your first statement to the world with 3 covers on your album. I mean, there's other bands that have done this as well. It just tells me that the band wasn't 100% ready to be in the studio yet. They didn't have enough of their own material. They probably started out doing covers and then slowly started working on their own stuff. And their own songs on this album, to me, feel a bit barren. There's some cool ideas. There's some cool playing here and there. It's very much a product of its time. And going back to the Boogie Woogie thing, it bothered me a lot. And I got to thinking about Elf, Ronnie James Dio, who I think the anniversary of his death was a couple days ago. But rest in peace, Ronnie. But that never bothered me. The Boogie Woogie stuff on Elf, I liked it because Dio has such a charismatic voice. It seemed to work really well. I always enjoyed that stuff. Here, I didn't like it. It's just not, I wasn't expecting this out of UFO, but looking at the date, it makes sense. I mean, they started playing in 68, so there's a little bit of that still clinging to their DNA. And as we go further into their catalog, it continues to cling to their DNA, especially when they get more of the piano synthesizer stuff working with them. But yeah, for me, this was the worst in the catalog. This was number 8 for me. Which brings us to UFO 2, Flying 1 Hour Space Rock, 1971. Sue.
All right, so this album was a little bit more of a stretch for me. I just I'm not a huge fan, and they went even deeper into the whole spacey kind of realm with this one. The standout track is obviously Prince Kajuku, which is some character that they apparently invented, because I googled it. It doesn't seem like there ever was a real Prince Kajuku. So, but it's a really cool track, and they had then followed up with The Coming of Prince Kajuku, which would be on the other side of the record when you flipped it. But that one is instrumental, I believe. But when I saw UFO, let me think, they played at the Trocadero with their guitarist Vinnie Moore, like, I don't know, about almost 20 years ago now. They actually played Prince Kajuku in the set, so that was kind of cool. But the album literally like put me in a trance. So it has this effect of these real hypnotic guitars and stuff. And the last track is, what is it, 26 minutes?
It is 26 minutes, 30 seconds.
If you're feeling a little bit drowsy, forget it. You'll be right to sleep.
Yeah.
So definitely not one of my favorite UFO albums, and I would rank it number 8.
All right. Alan.
Yeah, it's funny. On this one, they do pick a direction, unlike the debut album that was kind of a bit scattered. And on this one, yes, they decide they're going all in on the space rock thing, which was at the time kind of at its heyday. There were a lot of bands doing this kind of stuff. So yes, you get multiple songs, that are longer in length, very sound effect laden, not always a ton of song structure going on. It's not a style that appeals to me. It's the only album we'll talk about tonight that I don't have a copy of, and I don't really want a copy of. I do not need a copy of this one. The shorter form songs are not bad. Yeah, the Prince Kajuku and the Return of Prince Kajuku, those aren't bad. They're the songs that are like 4 minutes. Where they have more structure and melody to them rather than just being these long sweeping numbers. Flying basically takes up one side of the album. You've got, was it one of the opening tracks? Silverbird is like 7 minutes, kind of the same thing. Starstorm is very long. I think that one's way over 20 minutes. And again, they just don't go anywhere. It's not that I hate the style. It's a style I've never really gotten into or gotten used to. The closest I've come is maybe, some of the longer early Pink Floyd stuff, which is something else I'm actually pretty new to. I've never only recently started poking around in the early days of Pink Floyd.
Yeah, Zoller sent me a metal the CD Metal. It's quite good. Is that the name of it?
Metal is good. Yeah, Metal's the last one before Dark Side of the Moon, I think. So you're getting close to the point where they would hit their stride. Anyway.
I'd never heard it, so yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, that one's good. But yeah, some of the earlier, I'm thinking like some of the stuff like On a Saucer Full of Secrets. There's some similarities maybe here where they're just doing like here's 9 minutes of more sound effect atmosphere. There's no song structure to it. So yeah, they had a direction, just wasn't the direction for me. This one, I'd have to give this like a D. It's just not something that works for me personally, and I definitely, like Sue, I have it ranked at the bottom, number 8 of 8.
Wade, they probably didn't put those first two in the box set because I don't think they were on Chrysalis, and I think the box set is the Chrysalis years. If it's the one you're talking about that I'm aware of,
if it's that 10 CD set with
it's the Chrysalis years, yeah,
exactly.
Which Sue is. Show it again, Sue. Oop, 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 oop.
You're hiding behind your background.
The green. There's green on the cover, apparently. Oh, there it is.
There we go. Yeah. And yeah, if anybody's interested in the band, it's a nice box set. The only nitpick about that box set is it has no liner notes.
Right.
There's no booklet at all with it. So you get the 10 albums and that's it. They all do have a lot of bonus tracks. So that's cool. Marty, what did you think of your 1 hour space flight?
Well, I don't have a lot to say on this. 1971 came out, musically adventurous and noticeable step up in the playing, especially in Pete Way's bass playing. His bass lines are starting to get a lot more adventurous, busy, if you will. Hard separation in the panning remains a recording sign of the times. This one is more jam-oriented and transportative via space rock highlights. The last track is indeed 26 minutes, 30 seconds long, and no one needs that, especially on this album. It's just, to me, you can tell the band is getting better playing together. They're taking some more chances here and there with their music, and it doesn't appeal to me. It's just not in the realm. So for me, this is number 7. I think the musicality improvement is an improvement over UFO 1. So other than that, both albums could have been number 8 for me, to be honest. Which takes us to, a changing of the guard. We're on to 1974. There is a 3-year gap phenomenon, and we have a new guest that has joined the band at this point. Sue, what do you think about Phenomenon?
Okay, so I like the album. It's definitely a transitional album for them. It also it came after obviously a very big change with Michael Schenker entering the band.
Yep.
I think the story was that their guitarist at the time, that Mick Bolton, he was either ill or he couldn't make it to a show that UFO were playing with the Scorpions, and they just ended up stealing Michael Schenker from under Rudolph's wing there. So it's really amazing because they always had a language barrier, and Michael was not an easy person to get along with, but they
I
ended
saw a
up.
thing where he couldn't speak any English when they first got together, like
It's
zero.
true.
Yeah.
It's true. So I don't know how they did it really, and
No, it's crazy. Cocaine.
and yeah, and just even the cultural differences, him being German and them
Yeah.
being British, and I hardly think Michael was much of a prankster. You know, he seemed to be and unless he was drinking and everything, he would seem pretty serious, but I don't know for sure. So anyway, once they got together, they released a single called "Give Her the Gun," which was not included on the album, but it is now included on reissues as a bonus track, and that's actually a really good song, and it kind of showed the direction that they were now going in. So like, I find the album a bit uneven, the Phenomenon album. It has some really standout tracks, including Doctor Doctor, which was a stone cold classic as soon as they recorded it. And Rock Bottom, which featured Michael Schenker's incredible guitar playing, has one of the best guitar solos of all time. And then it has a few of those mid-paced rockers like "Oh My," which is kind of catchy. You know, that could have been a hit probably. Crystal Light is a ballad, but it's not too bad. I kind of like it. Space Child has a little of that remnants of UFO 1 and 2. But really, with between Doctor Doctor and Rock Bottom, you could really see where this band was going.
Mm-hmm. Where you going to rank Phenomenon?
Let me see here. Oh, there's something else I need to mention too.
Go for it.
Number 6.
Okay.
This was the beginning of UFO using the creative group Hypnosis to do their album covers. And that is pretty significant because those album covers were really getting a lot of attention. They did Pink Floyd's covers and 10cc and a lot of 70s rock bands that were really
Rush
popular.
Yep.
So if you ever get a chance, there's a documentary on Netflix called Squaring the Circle, the story of Hypnosis. And it's a fascinating view of that whole scene from the point of view of these artists. So it's really cool.
Cool. Never heard of it. I have to check that out. It sounds interesting. All right. Well, number 6 for Sue. Alan, where does Phenomenon sit on your plate?
Yeah, it is something of an uneven album. Sue's right. You know, well, it's a transition album, but you know they have a new direction. You know, there was a live album that came out, you know, in those interim years. I've never heard it, so I don't have any comment on it. But yeah, you know, they have a new guitarist, and they kind of make you a pretty hard right turn out of the space rock lane into more of, you know, the 70s, you know, hard rocking lane. But there's still, yeah, some remnants of, you know, that kind of softer, more mellow side on some of these tracks here. But, you know, the album scores big with 2 tracks. Sue pointed them out. You've got, you know, Doctor Doctor, which, yeah, you know, is iconic, and Rock Bottom, which is even more iconic. So the album's, you know, weighted with, you know, 2 classics of the era. Other than that, yeah, you get, you know, a bunch of different things. You know, Queen of the Deep is, yeah, that 70s kind of, you know, hard rock thing. It's a little more laid back. It's not a full ballad or anything. It's reasonably heavy. Built for Comfort's an interesting one just because it's still very bluesy, which once Schenker was in the band, they didn't do a ton of blues. They would do, you know, more laid back songs. They might do, you know, more ballad like songs. But Schenker was never one to really, you know, stick to a blues pattern in his playing. He does it really well on this track, so it's something he was capable of for sure. But apparently, it wasn't something that, you know, he maybe just didn't enjoy it a lot. It wasn't as interesting to him because you don't hear him or the band ever dip into that well very often. So you get to hear a few different things like that across the album. There's nothing on the album I think is really bad. There's, you know, songs that's like, okay, you know, that one I could kind of take it or leave it. but the fact that, you know, there's nothing off-putting about the album. They're trying out, you know, a few things, and they're finding their new lane and already nailing it with 2 classic tracks. So Phenomenon, for me, I would, you know, give it a solid B kind of grade. I'll go back and play it regularly, and have no problems with it. I have it ranked number 4 in the catalog for tonight.
Right on.
Take on. Oh, and just one thing too for folks who may have been just jumping in late. Apologies that I'm not posting in the chat. My for whatever reason, YouTube is being gimpy with my computer having things open tonight.
Just
so
use the main one. We can
if
share.
I do it, it posts under just the heavy metallurgy tag.
It's
So it looks
fine.
like yes, and so it posts it 3 times, and it looks like you're the one making the comment.
Oh,
So yeah, so I'm just staying out of the chat tonight. So I'm not ignoring folks. I'm definitely reading the comments and trying to put them up on screen, but just don't like something with my connections not letting me type. It's moving. It's causing the camera to slow way down, which obviously we don't want.
all right.
Anyway, so Marty, on to your take for album number 3 in their catalog, Phenomenon.
Well, Phenomenon. I mean, Schenker arrives and his presence is instantly felt. His tone is ever sharp. Sounds like a Marshall. I don't know. Old amp from the day turned up. Sounds great. His playing style is organic, very fluid and soulful. His solo in each song is often the highlight of every song, for me anyway. UFO opts to embrace a more commercial writing style on this, even though they're in the hard rock realm. They're out of the space rock into the hard rock. There's an aura of commercial. They want to get a hit. They want something. They're in that realm. But they struggle to create a consistently rocking album, and that, I'm sorry, it permeates the rest of their career for me. Too Young to Know, lead off track, decent song, but not a rocker like Dr. Doctor, which should have been the album opener. Tracks like Dr. Doctor, Rock Bottom, Oh My bring a degree of thunder, but get lost in ballads or pseudo ballads like Space Child, Crystal Light, Time on My Hands, Queen of the Deep. They feel like a chore to get through some of those songs. I mean, they're not. That's the weird crux of this whole biscuit for me with UFO. None of these songs are bad. They're really not. They're actually really well-written songs. They're just so vanilla. They're so vanilla. They lack something that really pushes it over the edge for me as a listener. Phenomenon is well-written and a step up, but feels like a long listen when it isn't really. More rock, please. That's the end of my notes. More rock, please. For me, Phenomenon's number 3. Having said all that, it's still, I think it's up there. The good songs are good. They're really like Dr. Doctor. What a great song. That's that sleazy, plotting, heavy rock. They don't get it, man. I mean, I'm going to get into it further here. They're so frustrating. Anyway, we are up to Force It, 1975. I'll show it since you're on the green screen there.
Oh, thanks. Okay.
Looks like it was a pretty cool photo shoot.
Yeah.
Right
now
on.
the US version of that cover has the couple like almost invisible because it was considered it might be offensive, so they tried to kind of hide it. But anyway, I think Force It is near perfect. I absolutely love this album. It not only produced some of their well-known songs like Let It Roll and Shoot Shoot and This Kids, but what you might consider some of their deeper cuts are some really, really standout tracks. Like the song Love, Lost Love. It could have been on Strangers in the Night. It was top caliber. Could have been a hit probably, so... I also really like Too Much of Nothing, which Pete Way had a solo writing credit on that. That's a really strong song as well, followed by Dance Your Life Away, which I don't like songs with titles like that. It's kind of silly, but it's a really strong tune. It has actually a little bit of funkiness to it. Just like the way Deep Purple and Whitesnake explored some of those funky bass lines back then as well. And there was a bonus track on my version called Million Miles, which was another ballad, of course, but a pretty decent one. And then the song This Kid's, which does appear on Strangers in the Night. Such an amazing song, but something that does bother me is the keyboard flourish. It's like you have this really hard rocking tune, and then there's like Liberace playing these little piano trills on it, and it just like it definitely takes away from the heaviness of the song.
Right. Where did you rank Force It?
I put that at number 3.
All right. Number 3, Alan, Force It, 1975. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a very strong album, and I think that is attested to by the fact that a ton of these songs were in their live set for a long time. Even 4 or 5 years later with Strangers in the Night, there's something like 5 tracks from this album featured on that one. So it tells you right off that it's got a pretty solid deep track list to it. Yeah, the album cover, like Sue said, comes in a couple of variations where they try to blur out the couple for some territories. The whole thing, the couple in the bathtub's like whatever. The thing that's always bugged me about this cover is what in the world is with all the bloody plumbing that's all over the thing. That's it's
shiny.
Hypnosis sometimes had some weird ideas. They get praised as geniuses, but every now and then it just kind of left me scratching my head. I did dig around and I found out the answers to what's going on here. Do either of you know what it is?
Maybe they're suggesting that what's happening in the background isn't clean and there's a lot of water to clean it up a little bit. I don't know.
That would be a very reasonable interpretation, but that's not where they were going with it.
No, I have no idea then.
Sue?
No idea.
If you pronounce the album name with a bit of a British accent, it'll sound more like faucet. And so they decided they would put faucets all over the bloody artwork.
Jesus.
Hypnosis, you're not always the genius that everyone claims you are.
That's where you had like jazz hands. Genius. Yeah.
That's where it's like, you guys put a lot more thought than that into the Pink Floyd covers. You couldn't do a little better than faucets for UFO. Come on.
Well, they were into LSD, so.
Yeah, that's I don't know. That's why the cover has all that stuff on it. But yeah, let's look at the track list here. Yeah, Sue's right. Let It Roll and Shoot Shoot. Great opening pair right away, establishing that they are on their hard rock path now. No looking back. The third track, High Flyer, this is kind of the laid-back ballady track, and it is gorgeous. I love this song to death. This is one of the songs that really hooked me into UFO, actually. This was the first UFO album I heard. The first couple of plays is like, okay, there's the rocking songs kind of stand out. But after a few plays, it was High Flyer that I kept going back to. It's a perfect vehicle showcasing Phil Mogg doing what he does best, what we talked about in the opening, where he has, this very kind of, sad, dreamy, wistful longing to his vocals, talking about the opportunities missed, the ones that got away, looking back on better times with hindsight and realizing that you lost something along the way. He just captures that. And Schenker is perfect for those kind of songs as well. As Sue correctly pointed out, in her retrospective on the band, Schenker is incredibly emotive with his guitar playing. That he can convey just about any human emotion you want with that instrument. And again, I'm taking that from Sue's article. That's not my original observation, but I think most people would agree with that. Some players are good technical players. Some players are, more bluesy. Some players are improv. Some are very emotive. Schenker can do a lot of things, which is why he's always been so highly touted as a guitarist. But when Mogg's, trying to do this kind of song, we've got, this, very, kind of, dreamy, longing, wistful tone to his voice. Schenker can match that on his instrument so incredibly well. And it takes the song from being really good to absolutely perfect. Going on. Yeah, Love Lost Love is absolutely a good one. It should have been on Strangers in the Night. It would have been a great inclusion. You can only fit so many albums in, or so many songs into a live album, but yeah, that's another good one. Absolutely. I would, Out in the Street, tended to be in their live set. That one, I'm not as keen on as some folks. This is one where, to me, yes, they've got a little bit of that tinkly, kind of synthesizer keyboard in the background that doesn't quite work for me. There are times it works well with UFO, and there are times that they either lean on it too much or they put it in the wrong places. And Out in the Street's just not a personal favorite of mine, although a lot of fans do like it. Side 2 has some good things also. Mother Mary has kind of a slow, almost kind of grinding beat to it. It's Will Philma gets to go in the other direction and develop this kind of much tougher, streetwise, urban sound, which he's also very good at. Another thing that lots of people would comment on when they were asked about Phil Mogg in interviews is like, great guy, very funny, hard drinker. I would not want to piss him off and meet him in an alley anywhere. A lot of people are that kind of like, yeah, you don't F around with this guy. He can back it up. And then you also have, Too Much of Nothing is pretty good. I agree with Sue. Dance Your Life Away. You look at that song title, it's like, there's no way that's going to work. it's going to be a little bit of a misfire. And then, it closes, with the slightly longer This Kids. This is where UFO has some weird song naming conventions. They tend to do a lot of songs where it's like a 2-word title, but it's the same word repeated. We've already talked about Doctor Doctor and Shoot Shoot. It's going to keep happening.
Danger Danger.
That's a completely different animal. When Ted Poley does it, it's magic. When UFO does it, it works okay too. But yeah, it's definitely something Phil would go back to over and over. But yeah, this song, it's This Kids, KID''S. So it's like, this kid's what? This kid's rocking? This kid's car? This kid's girl? This kid's potato gun? I don't. Now that one I never could find out what they were trying to do with some of these song name conventions. Why they basically had like half a song title. It always left me scratching my head a bit. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just the title, whatever. A lot of people again like this one a bunch. It's not a personal favorite on the album for me. Nothing wrong with it. But yeah, still at the end of the day, you've got a very good album, very loaded. Side A in particular, the first 4 tracks are just all top notch. So for me, this is a B+ kind of album. It's one of their best, good deep track list, and I've got it ranked at number 2. We all probably know where number 1's ending up for most of us at the end of the night. So you could essentially say, spoiler alert, this is my favorite of their studio albums.
Yep.
So Marty, what do you think of Fawcett? I'm gonna go keep saying Fawcett now.
Well, Let It Roll is a proper album opener. Upbeat, catchy, connects their early albums to where they are at now. Cowbell, sick lead riff. Yes, please. Shoot Shoot, another catchy, bluesy, and heavy rocker. Yes. High Flyer, 3 songs in, and they rush into a ballad. It's good, great solo. It just too soon in the track listing. Love Lost Love, solid recovery rocker, but a bit atypical. Out on the Streets. I think the thing with Out on the Streets that might bug you is it takes like a solid minute before they get to the hook.
It is a little slow to develop. That's fair.
It's like they do that a lot, I've noticed. Don't just skim through the song and like, oh, this is a ballad, because something's coming, and it takes them a minute or two to get into it. Out in the Streets takes a minute to kick in and embrace a hook, but their back and forth finally connects. It's a good song. The rest of the album is yet another solid album, but the songs tend to meander, the second half in particular. And their seemingly very vanilla approach to songwriting is becoming their style. That sounds bad, but it's my number 2 record. Of their studio albums, I thought it's the most punch, bang for your buck at the beginning of the album. And again, even their ballady songs, I don't hate them. I just want them to be less, and I want when they're in the rock to be a little bit more, because they've got the tools, man. They got it all. They have a cool sound. It's just they play it safe. They play it very safe. Their guitars though, the solos, great. All right, which brings us to 1976. No heavy petting.
Okay, so with this one, another weird album cover and a weird title and all that stuff.
Now that's
which
a sick little monkey.
probably did not help them with making record sales, but anyway, they have that weird British humor, I guess. But you're opening with Natural Thing, which is just such a great, fast moving, catchy, perfect opening track. Then it goes into I'm a Loser, which is a pretty cool tune. Again, Phil telling that story about this lonely soul out in the world who thinks he's a loser. And then we get into Can You Roll Her, which really sounds like a Lost Scorpions song from like the Blackout era to me. I wonder if Michael actually took some of that influence when he went back for Love Drive briefly. Then we have Belladonna, Skip. Just a really sappy ballad that I do not care for at all. Then we have Reasons Love, which is a really excellent tune that I like quite a bit. Highway Lady explores some rockabilly influence with bouncy keyboards. On with the Action is like, I couldn't help but laugh hearing it again because it's a good song, but the way they do the chorus, it's like, on with the rock. I don't know. It just sounds like they're deliberately singing it in a weird way. So that kind of ruined it for me. But A Fool of Love sounds a lot like Whitesnake, and then Martian Landscape doesn't do much for me. So it was a decent record, but not as good as Force It, and I'm putting it at number 5.
All right. Alan.
All right. Yes. So monkey, with intravenously connected to lady.
Sick little monkey.
I can assume the monkey is very sick and needed a transfusion stat. Again, come on.
Alan at the record store. That's what he looks like, everybody.
Same. The monkey just sits up here on the shoulder and just keeps pumping that little brain chemical in there. Just like, ooh, I could buy that.
More burrito, bigger and more.
I could buy all the burritos. But and it's like, come on, Hypnosis never in a million years would have put a piece of artwork like this in front of Roger Waters' big nose. But they had no problem pawning it off on UFO for some reason. It's like, if a design company was giving me this as the artwork, I would find another design company. I don't care how hip you might be. That just ain't happening. Anyway, a lot of fans would definitely agree with Sue's synopsis on this album that while good, most people saw it as a step down from Force It, that it's not quite as deep and maybe doesn't have that big iconic rock bottom kind of or track. But I think it still has a pretty good track list, and there's a lot on here that I do like more than Sue mentioned. Natural Thing is a killer opening track. It's got just one of these great 70s riffs, just the dun 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 dun, and the drums and stuff come in just right, just do 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 do, and then they just all hit big, and it's just one of those moments that if you've got it turned up loud, it'll make the hair on your arm stand up. Killer opening to the track, killer riff to it, absolutely. The chorus to the song is a little weird. It's the only thing that kind of maybe holds the song back from being a huge standout in their catalog, but it is still a really great song. I love it. It comes right out of the gate, hits you hard in the face. It's exactly what you want the album opener to do. I'm a Loser is okay. This one, it feels to me a little bit like it could have been Out in the Streets Part 2. It's like Sue said, it's got that same kind of, somebody's, kind of, a bit lost, wondering, what they're making of themselves kind of thing. I think it's a bit better than Out in the Street, but I'm probably in the minority on that. Can You Roller? This was a really good one. A very tense energy to it. Another kind of harder streetwise song. Someone in the comments a minute ago mentioned that this sounds like the kind of song that could show up like in a Quentin Tarantino movie or something. I'm like, you're absolutely right. It absolutely could. That would fit completely. So yeah, another good strong number there. Belladonna is the ballad. I like this one. Now, while it is maybe a bit sappy, Mogg can pull this off without them sounding cheesy. Ballads can go different directions. Mogg knows how to tug at those heartstrings just a little bit and inject that little bit of sadness into this kind of song so that it doesn't, to me, feel just like a total piece of fluff. It's a little somber air to it. That the atmosphere is a little more downtrodden than you'd expect in a typical ballad. This isn't, and this may be the kind of thing that actually hurt the band to an extent. We talked earlier about how they had trouble getting radio play. For a lot of bands, the ballad would be the song that might go over well with an audience. But yeah, this isn't, the kind of, feel good, happy, sing along kind of ballad. This is the kind of like, oh, my puppy's sick and it's raining outside kind of ballad. Not the kind of thing most people are going to call in and request, on, K-Rock, Los Angeles, to ask, Rodney on the Rock to play or something. Like, nah, we want to hear a good song. We want to hear a fun song, an energetic song, a happy song. Not the song that tells us, that, Sophie has a choice to make. But yeah, I think it's done really well. I do like it as a ballad here. What else is on here? On side 2, you've got, On With the Action. It does have a weird kind of delivery to it, but I really like it. It's another one that's got that kind of slower, kind of street level, very blue collar grind to it. And I think UFO does those songs quite well. So I like the delivery there. Martian Landscape's not bad. It's a little bit longer track. This one kind of goes back a little bit more where they're doing the more epic, the soundscape kind of thing. But funnily enough, the song is not about Mars. It's not a space rock track. Again, digging around in fan forms and stuff. The track is actually about, wait for it, Argentina.
Faucets.
I'd forget if it was one of the band members. I don't know if the band had played South America or if just a couple of the guys had gone to Argentina on vacation or something and just really thought Argentina does have like a very interesting like geology and history and landscape to it. So yeah, it was actually just about this kind of very different, unique, tranquil, unusual landscape in Argentina. So it's an okay track. I wouldn't put it on like the top 10 UFO songs of all time, but it's got kind of a cool vibe to it. So yeah, at the end of the day, it is a step down from Force It. When you look at the track list, it doesn't have those one or two songs that you just have to hear. Natural Thing for me is probably the closest to something like that on this album. But I don't think it's a bad album either. Some people, you're reading through reviews and fan comments and stuff, some people are very down on this album. Something we haven't talked about much is production. Some people have a real gripe with the production on these first couple of Chrysalis era UFO albums. That they're
all so clean. They're crystal clean, all of them.
Well, and actually, though, people gripe that these first two are not. That they, in their opinion, they're kind of underproduced.
Well, I'm listening to remastered shit on streaming, so I mean,
okay, there you
what
go.
I'm listening to is probably tweaked.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah, the story was, on these first couple, actually, I guess these first three, including this one, they had a Chrysalis provided producer. I think was it Leo Lyons? Maybe getting the wrong name there. Sorry, but the band didn't necessarily have a lot of complaints about him, but a lot of the fans, thought he was underproducing the band, that the drum sound wasn't, particularly good, that he wasn't getting the best performances, out of the rhythm section, and that they just, they end up sounding a little flat, that they needed, kind of, more punching up, in the studio that they weren't getting. That really doesn't ring true with me. Now, I'm not somebody with like a well-trained ear and a musical background, so I'm not going to notice these things where like, oh, he tapped the fader a quarter of an inch too much, 3/8 of a second early. That I'm never going to know that stuff. Some people do, and that's fine. So I get it. If some people can hear those things and it bugs them, that's fair. To me, I guess, as a more casual listener, I don't really notice any issues with the production on these albums. So yeah, I tend to, I don't rank it, incredibly high. I've actually got it at the same place Sue does at 5, but I still think, it's a pretty solid album. It just doesn't have the iconic tracks that you tend to find on their other records. But for me, this is still a solid B kind of grade. I've got no problem taking No Heavy Petting out and giving it a spin from time to time. There's enough good songs on here that I do enjoy going back to, that I've got no gripes with it. So that would be my take on No Heavy Petting from 1976. Marty, what is your take on this monkey?
Well, let's get into the track listing. Natural Thing, a sleazy rocker. I feel like it's from the streets. This is where the band is good, man. They're hard rocking. They put a little sleaze in with it. I feel like I did that. Even the undeniably pop, sensible.
Oh, I think Marty froze.
Oh, I thought I was pausing for dramatic effect.
Yeah.
Well, we will get back to that in a moment. We'll give him a chance to reboot.
Okay.
While we do, Sue, I had a follow-up question, something we talked about earlier. Was like, maybe why, UFO never quite got to that top tier, why they were always opening band, and why fans kind of don't always check them out early on. Something I've thought of, the past week or so is, obviously while, this band's very, solid, they are built around the guitarist. Schenker is the star of the show always. And, at least at this point in time, a lot of, I feel like heavy metal fans are not necessarily as devoted to the cult of the guitar as they were during the 70s and 80s. That, somewhere in the 90s and 2000s, the guitar started to be less central to a lot of heavy music, and people got much more into like, the rhythmic parts. These days you hear people gush about drummers as much, if not more, than you do guitarists in bands. Could that be something that is keeping, people away from UFO? Actually, they're like, oh, it's another Guitar Hero band. I'm too hipster for that. I only want to listen to bands that, use, some kind of, Aboriginal, percussion. That's my. What do you think? Am I off base there?
No, I think that's a good take on it. And because they did have the longer songs, the more epic songs, and and then the ballads and things, I feel like tastes change, especially once punk came in the late 70s. That's actually what caused the downfall of Hypnosis, was on these streets in London that they used to hang out in. They were starting to see shirts that said, Pink Floyd sucks and corporate rock sucks and that kind of thing. So people might have started perceiving bands like UFO with the overblown guitar solos and all that as being too self-indulgent and corporate.
Yeah, that could be. Yep. Yeah. UFO was still, active, and I feel like they were still at least on people's radar in like, the new wave of British heavy metal era. You look at old like, bills of, bands from back then, and you would often see, bands like, UFO and Tigers of Pantang and maybe early Def Leppard. I'm making this combination up, but those kind of UFO was on those bills with those bands.
And also they were constantly being covered in Kerrang and those British magazines, and so they were still very much a part of the scene.
Yep. Yeah. Another thing that may be an issue is, we're not going to get into it much tonight, but UFO didn't exactly retire after Strangers in the Night.
Mhm.
There's a lot of material that came after, but I feel like they were
Mhm.
one of the many bands that had trouble transitioning into the 80s.
Hmm. Yeah, spoiler alert. I really never got into the Paul Chapman era of UFO. I've tried and tried, and it doesn't click for me. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, for me at least, the first couple of albums they did, The Wild, The Willing, The Innocent,
mhm.
which,
No
must have
place
been
to run.
that
Mhm.
No Place Run. Those aren't, even Mechanics is okay, but they pretty quickly start sliding downhill after
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
And even those first three, they're not on par with the 70s albums.
Right.
Schenker leaving was a big blow to them.
It was. It was. And then he went off and did some phenomenal albums and on his own. So
Mhm. Yeah, it became a little bit of a situation like with Black Sabbath and Ozzy, whereas Ozzy was having
exactly.
great success, by
That's
the mid
right.
80s, and Black Sabbath was kind of, I like 80s Black Sabbath, but at
Hmm.
the time, they were lost.
Hmm.
Most people didn't know they were a thing anymore. And yeah, Schenker was doing well with MSG while UFO was just constantly changing out members and getting softer and more AOR oriented, and just,
Yeah.
kind of lost the plot in the 80s quite a bit.
Yeah.
There he is. He is back.
Welcome back.
Stu and I have just been, discussing different aspects of UFO. Well, you got everything rebooted.
I think he's frozen again.
So maybe he's not back.
Mm.
Or maybe he's trolling me, pretending he's not back. We'll give him a moment and see. No, yeah, see, it looks like he might still be a bit frozen up there. But yeah, something, just another side note while Marty gets his system back up. Where UFO apparently was one of those cases that we hear far too many of over time, that while they're on Chrysalis Records, they're doing all these world tours, putting out all these big albums, you'd assume they were in pretty good shape after all of that. But during one of those breakups, when the band temporarily was disassembled in like either the earliest 80s, I don't remember the exact date, one I think was Pete Way, ended up in the unemployment line to
Mhm.
collect. He was on the dole in London,
Mhm.
and somebody actually recognized him in the line. He's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, aren't you in that band UFO? What the
Mhm.
hell are you doing standing here? Aren't you like rich?" And man, talk about what's got to be a horribly humbling experience. He was just
Mhm.
like, "We didn't make anything,
Mhm.
off those albums at all." He's like, "No, once when the band was done and all the bills were paid off,
Mhm.
yeah, I had to go down and try to get on the dole." So
Yeah, that was
really
an
humbling.
unfortunate thing. Those labels used to rip the artists off so badly, and it
Mhm.
probably still happens today, so just in different ways.
Hang
Yeah,
in there,
Ryan.
Ryan. Sorry to hear that, Ryan.
Yep.
Tough times. So sorry.
Take care, Ryan. Glad you hopped on for at least a second, man. But yeah, just another one of those little things you wouldn't think that musicians in a band, yes, while they weren't Led Zeppelin big or anything,
Mhm.
you wouldn't think they would be immediately in the unemployment line,
Mhm.
as soon as the band disbanded. But that was a problem for some of them at least.
Mhm.
So Marty, we good?
I don't know. My internet's come on and off, but no
Mhm.
heavy petting. Can I finish that real quick?
Yeah.
Please do. Yep.
I
We've
like
just
the,
we've been just keeping time on some
Yeah.
other related topics until you got
Mhm.
back
that's
on.
cool. I don't know what the hell's going on.
It's all right. You can pick up right where you left off.
As soon as it happened, I hear my kid upstairs going, "What the heck's going on with the internet?" Must have interfered the video game night. So yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Well, anyway, I like Natural Thing. I wish they'd do more of that in their catalog. I'm a Loser is a good song, but a complete deflation after Natural Thing. More keyboards are entering UFO's repertoire. I find myself impatiently waiting for the solos in all these songs. When they're not bad songs, they're just kind of okay. The piano element gives this era that boogie woogie aesthetic yet again. It shows how important the debut actually was in establishing UFO sound. At the time, you didn't think much about it. When you hear the ding 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 ding, like those like droning piano chords, it's like this reminds me of the debut. So it's obviously they like where they came from. Can You Roll Her rocks, Belladonna, another ballad, kind of lifeless to me. Reasons. I can't read my own writing.
Reasons Love.
Reasons, Love, Rocks, Highway Lady. I mean, they're back and forth, back and forth. They just can't establish. They just have a hard time what they want. What do they want to be? You know, it's like they're swinging for these commercial success hits, and this type of ballads they're writing are really good, but they're not going to be as successful. They don't have the wow factor. Like, I hate to say it, Kiss is Beth. I hate that stupid song, but why was that a popular song? You know, it makes no damn sense. But there's nothing like that on here. It's just they're just weird what they're aiming for. You know, they're trying to be diverse in their songwriting, which I get. There's a bunch of, you know, different guys in the band that are actually contributing music. It isn't all just the guitar player. Yeah, we'll get into that more as we go. But No Heavy Petting for me is number 5. I think we all picked 5 on this one, actually. So
I think we did, yeah. And you brought up a good point there too, Marty. Before we move on, another thing a lot of people do gripe about with No Heavy Petting is the piano, the electric piano element is working its way into the songs more. The band has picked up a full-time keyboardist, which they didn't have in on Phenomenon or stuff. They had session people play for them, but then they did add a person. On this album, I don't think it's too intrusive. It's going to become intrusive in a minute or two.
Beth was a hit because there is no God. You're exactly right, Aaron.
I don't know. Beth was probably a hit because at the time Gene Simmons was considered God, and anything Kiss released was probably going to chart.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of fans do comment that they feel like the piano sometimes is getting in the way of some of these songs on No Heavy Petting, which is why some folks again will vote this one down a little bit. I don't hear too much of that on the album myself, but I do hear it on another album we haven't gotten to yet. But yeah, the piano is an issue for some fans starting around this point.
Right on. Sorry about the internet stuff, everybody.
Oh, no worries. It's going to happen.
It's going to happen, definitely.
You're blanking out, and I can't comment tonight. So, yep.
The Gremlins are running amok for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're up, Sue, to 1977's Lights Out.
Lights Out. Okay, so we have out of the 8 tracks on here, we have 3 of UFO's best songs of all time. First track, Too Hot to Handle. The 4th track, Lights Out, and the 8th track, Love to Love. So let's unpack a little bit. So Too Hot to Handle comes just bursting out. It's a quick, short song. It's got everything that you could want in an opening track, and it's just so much fun. When you're driving the car and you roll the window down and this is blasting, it's a perfect summertime fun song. It should have been a massive hit, so definitely. Then we have Just Another Suicide, which I think is an incredible song. I just wish it didn't have that word in it. The word suicide just immediately makes it a turnoff, but it's a really fantastic song. And then Try Me is one of their better ballads. I admit I will sit and listen to this one. It's a bit tedious, but I do like it. Lights Out, one of you guys said before, probably they're the best song.
It's the best song. I did. It's the best song they've ever written, for sure.
So it's an absolute barn burner, and it goes from start to finish. It's heavy, it's fast, it's like an all-out metal song.
It's a great hook. The chorus is a great hook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
And the lyrics are about war, so it's a little bit more compelling than some of their other stuff.
Yep.
Getting Ready, not bad, kind of plotting. Alone Again, or there's one of those half titles. Alone Again, or what?
Or Not Alone.
It's a really good song, though. Almost Beatles influenced, maybe. A fun poppy song right there. Electric Phase, really, really good. Like that one a lot. Then we get to Love, which is simply the greatest power ballad of all time by any band. anytime, anywhere. So, and I will defend that all the way. So, when you hear Phil Moggs singing on this one, this was his absolute signature song, in my opinion. He never belted it out so hard as he does on this song. And you just like feel all the emotion coming out of him on that. So I've been lucky enough to see him play it live a few times, and it just doesn't get better. So it's also got an extremely great guitar solo in it too.
All right. What did you rank Lights Out at?
I gave that number 4.
All right. There we go. Alan.
All right. So yeah, with Lights Out, the band finally got to bring in a non-chrysalis producer. So right away, you can hear there is a step up in the production values. Again, I don't mind the production on the first 3 from this era, but for fans that were unhappy with the way the albums were being produced, this is where they do get a big bump in their sound. So fair enough. Yeah, the album sounds really good. As Sue mentioned, yes, there are 3 absolute staples on the album. Too Hot to Handle is great. Lights Out is it's probably not my favorite song by them, but it would be way up there. It's hard to argue against. And as Sue said, Love to Love, yes, it's a signature song. That was a great way to phrase it, Sue. Absolutely beautifully done. It's the perfect vehicle for Moog's voice. Cannot miss with that. My issues with this album, and one thing I've noticed with this album, digging around over the past few weeks, this is an album that people tend to rank either very high or kind of low. There are a lot of people that consider this the band's best album, best studio album anyway. There are also a lot of folks who are not as keen on this album. And I do have some misgivings about it overall. While it has those 3 great songs, the rest of the track list is not that strong for me. Mm-hmm. This is not a case with like Phenomenon where it's got 2 great songs and the rest are kind of interesting if different. It's more like there's 3 songs on here I love, and the rest, none of them are bad, really. Well, there's one I don't like, actually. But there's not anything else that's really that strong for me, at least. Try Me, is as decent as a ballad, but it's not my favorite by them. The song that you mentioned, Sue, Alone Again, or yes, another half title. And your Beatles comparison is actually very apt because it is actually a cover song. It's an obscure band called Love.
Yeah.
And it was recorded like in 1967, kind of the height of the London psychedelia sound, and the song. So it feels like an old when I was first listening to it, I'm like, this is a weird song. It's got this. It sounds like an old British pop song that I like. I bet I heard this like on some golden oldies thing listening with my dad when I was a kid, and I just couldn't place it. And then when I started looking into the liner, I was like, oh, holy crap, it really is an old British pop song. It sounds like something that should have been on their first album, the kind of thing they would have, dabbled with back then. It feels a bit out of place to me here. This deep, into their career, they're a long, long way from the UFO club at this point. So maybe it was just, meant, as a fun thing to kind of revisit that. Okay. It doesn't work for me. And then Electric, and all these other songs, it's like they don't ever make a strong impression on me. So there are 3 songs I like a ton, 1 song I don't, and that leaves 4 songs that are kind of placeholders for me. The other thing that really kind of so Dad, what did I miss?
Simon, just curious, when do we get to the death metal era?
There's the reunion.
I haven't heard anything past the 70s, so anything is wide open. Who knows?
Schenker comes back in 95 for Walk on Water when Scott Burns agreed to produce him in Morrisound. And
he got an HM2 Boss death metal pedal. Yeah.
The word is feral. Absolutely. The chainsaw sounds he makes on that white flying V will just shred your guts. It's unbelievable. So, but again, we're not covering that era tonight, Simon. You got to tune in for part 2.
Cover that over on,
another time.
Explosive Action.
So yeah, the other thing with Lights Out that bugs me, while the production values are going up, the guitar presence is kind of getting pushed in the background. This is the one album where it doesn't feel like you've got Schenker front and center. When the solos come up, they're more subdued. There's more of that electric piano going on. There's more little orchestral flourishes going on here and
there. They go symphonic on occasion. There's highfalutin.
Yes. Yeah, they're getting, and in my notes, I have, they're getting a little fancy for a band that's known to be strongly rooted in blue collar hard rock sensibilities. I know some songs it works okay, like Love to Love. Again, I hate the whole Chef's Kiss thing, but if I was prone to doing that, I would do it for that song. but for some of the other songs here, I'm just like, that's not quite what I'm looking for here. It's like, where's Michael? Where Schenker? Hello?
He's Shrinker on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And, he's, and, again, you dig into some of it and, one of the issues going on with the band, Schenker did feel like he was kind of being relegated to the background a little bit on this album. There were lots of other issues. Sue touched on a bunch of them, earlier. The language barrier, culture barrier. Schenker just, having one of those kind of, touchy genius personalities. There's been a lot of stories that have come to light over the years. The rest of the band did tend to give him a pretty hard time too, which, why? Just, young guys being dicks, which young guys sometimes will do.
And they're all drinking and drugging. And
when you're out drinking and drugging and, you're giving your kind of shy, introverted German guitarist a hard time because we kicked your bloody ass in the war, you fucking,
or maybe he's getting more women backstage than the other guys are, who knows? Who knows what the dynamic is?
But whatever, they were on his case, for whatever reasons and whatever circumstances. So there were issues here, and Schenker's. So with Schenker's presence being downplayed, and a lot of these songs just not vibing with me. Lights Out is not an album I rank very high. I tend to be in that camp that puts it a little lower. I've got it ranked 6th out of the 8 we're talking about tonight. Not a bad album. Again, there are 3 absolute tentpole kind of songs here. So I would still give it like a B- grade just based on the strength of those 3. B-, my translation on that usually is like the album, has some good things going on, but it has some notable problems holding it back for me. And so that's kind of the perfect grade for me to give this one. So I'll rank it number 6. And we'll find out what Marty thinks about Lights Out.
Well, as that UFO navigates the 70s, they're sounding more and more like a proper denizen of the era. Pristine, almost lifeless production. I know it's a different producer, but it's just so clean and sterile. The production is too crisp and clean for me. Again, I'm listening to digital remasters on Spotify, so I don't know. But this hints at a desire for a wider commercial acceptance, which they've always hinted at. When the band rocks is where their sweet spot is, but even those tracks feel unnecessarily safe, especially on this record. Too Hot to Handle. I have to disagree with Sue on this. It's a decent song, but kind of a vanilla rocker. Just Another Suicide, written by Mog. Lots of piano. Feels damn near like a show tune. Ugh. My notes say ugh. They follow that up by the symphonic ballad Try Me. I mean, what does this band want to be exactly? These type of songs are always well constructed, but just boring. They're just boring. And they're like one after the other. It's like, here we come. We have a keyboardist who wants to do symphonic shit. Here we are. Lights Out, the best song they ever did. Always played on satellite radio. And why is that? Because it's their heaviest song. It's got a great hook to it. It's got a great chorus to it. know what's works for you. I mean, they constructed this freaking live record with all their bangers on it. There isn't like 2 fucking ballads in a row. Or show tuney fucking whatever. Oh my god. And then I put Alone Again. What the fuck? I don't even know. I don't even remember what that means, but it must not have been good. I mean, for me, the album climaxes at Lights Out and then slinks off like a recently neutered dog. That's the way this record feels. It's building to something. It hits the crescendo at Lights Out, and then down it goes. So for me, I'm with you, Alan. Number six. Yep, recently neutered dog. I was happy with that little note there. Anyway, Sue, what's up? We got number 19.
And we wonder why Michael left soon after this.
Yeah, 1978, Obsession.
Okay, so Obsession is a very, very special album to me. When you are getting really into a band and you buy a particular album when you're 16 and you're going through all that high school stuff and you're spending a lot of time alone in your room and you're putting your ear up against the speaker and the album Obsession is the one coming out, it's an album that's going to stick with you the rest of your life. So for me, it's that personal connection that it makes this my favorite UFO studio album. And one thing you have to say about it is the production and Schenker's guitar tone are so flawless. It's like gone down in history as one of the best guitar tone albums of all time. Of
Great.
any
He's
genre.
got a great fucking tone. So good.
Yeah. So Only You Can Rock Me is my actual favorite UFO song. I considered it my personal anthem for years and years, and it was played at our wedding and everything. So just a really special song for me. Another one of those roll the windows down kind of songs, and even my daughter likes it. So that's pretty special. And then Pack It Up and Go is like a good rockin' tune. I used to do, when I worked at an ad agency, I used to do work for a Hertz rental car. And we would have these signs that would be up at the airport or whatever to like upsell you on certain car models. And one of the captions I wrote for this minivan was Pack It Up and Go. So guess where I got that from? And that's followed by a really neat little instrumental called Arbory Hill. And it sounds like a flute playing in it, but I think it's a keyboard. But it's a really like memorable instrumental. I like it a lot.
I like the antithesis to what you think about this record, by the way. I love it. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
I love it.
So Ain't No Baby. It's one of those stronger kind of power ballads, and that's pretty good. Looking Out for Number One. It has that show tune kind of overblown production, but I don't mind. And then Hot and Ready is kind of a standard rocker along the lines of what the Scorpions were doing at the time. And then you have Cherry, which is an extremely unique song. The way that they structured the song, it's a story about one of these journeymen, meets this woman on the road, and she's like a stripper or whatever. But it builds the story, and then they do this really unique thing where he goes like, "We are going," and it's just like it's a song that you'll never forget once you hear it. And I really wish bands would be more creative in doing little bridges and different little flourishes like that in their songs to make them not all sound so by the numbers. So I was always impressed with that tune. Then it wraps up with You Don't Fool Me and a reprise of Looking Out for Number One. And then Born to Lose. Oh, one more for the rodeo, Born to Lose. So it's like side two isn't quite as strong as side one, but it's there's not a bad song on it, and it's just always been really special to me. So.
Right on. Where did you rank Obsession?
Number 2.
Ooh, right on, right up there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Alan.
Okay. Yeah. This one, the things that they were having maybe some issues with, in my opinion, on the previous album, they fix here. For example, Schenker's, yes, guitar much more prominent. As Sue said, it's the album's kind of a showcase for how good he can sound. The production on this one is again very strong. They're still using the orchestral bits and strings and stuff here, but I feel like they use them better on this album. It's maybe like Lights Out, they had to get used to how to build that into some of the songs, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. On this album, I think those elements do play out much better here. So the fact that you don't have those things kind of stepping on their toes or tripping them up, and you've got Schenker, back in the mix more prominently where he needs to be. Right away, Obsession, is doing things correctly. And yeah, it's got a good set of songs. Only You Can Rock Me, one of the some better known songs. Yes, a very good one. Arbor Hill, yeah, is kind of a unique short instrumental, and I want to say it really is a flute, though I don't know who played the flute. But yeah, it's it works. It's kind of just a shorter, calm interlude. Going on to the rest of it, yeah, looking out for number 1. And then the fact that they felt the need to reprise it on side 2. And like, I can handle it once on side A, but let's not revisit it on side 2. Let's not do that. Hot and Ready, yeah, it's a bit of a standard rocker, but UFO is good at standard rockers.
Sponsored by Little Caesars, Hot and Ready, by the way.
Like Marty's been saying, it's kind of the band's forte, so not going to complain when they roll one of those out. Sue's right. Cherry, is a very unique song. It's very catchy. You don't have to hear it more than once or twice before you will know that song forever, whether you like it or not. It is not a personal favorite of mine in their catalog, but yeah, it stands out. It's unique. It's not a bad song. I just don't rank it as high as a lot of fans do. I like some of the last couple of songs too. Like One More for the Rodeo is still also a very strong number. So overall, it's a very good album, very consistent start to back. Again, it maybe doesn't have anything quite on the level of a Rock Bottom or a Love Lost Love kind of mega defining track, but it does have lots of solid stuff. There's nothing on here that I feel is like really bad, really out of place. Like the cover from Love that kind of gummed up the works on a previous album. So yeah, Obsession, I will say that it's one Sue obviously has a long and very cool history with the album. This one I have fewer spins with than most of the other albums we're talking about tonight. So not as long a history with the album. I would still rank it 3 here tonight. I think it's doing everything right, not really doing anything wrong. It maybe just if it had like 1 or 2 of those kind of move like Doctor or Rock Bottom onto this album, and it'd probably be ranked number 2 pretty easily. But I'll still give it a solid like B, getting into B+ territory kind of grade, and rank it 3rd. So yeah, a good album. They've got this kind of new production and new approach, kind of down pat at this point. Marty, what do you think of the album that cover has the most ball bearings on the cover of any album I can think of?
I think this is a step up from Lights Out for sure. I mean, I feel bad. Only You Can Rock Me. I think it's the smart opener for the album, but it's a bit average for me. Pack It Up and Go. Here we go. Upbeat track with balls. More of this hard hitting and slightly sleazy style suits Schenker's style perfectly and allows him out of the stable to stretch his legs, so to speak. Arbor Hill, they kill the vibe with acoustic guitars and folk flutes. This is a pointless minute 11-second sidestep. Ain't No Baby, good song, heavy in a weird way. It's kind of ballady, but has a heavy slant to it. Then they go ahead and kill it again with Looking Out for Number 1. More symphonic experimentation, show tune. Again, what do you want to be? You want to be Meatloaf? You want to go out and be Meatloaf? the English Meatloaf, great. Have fun with that. Queen, you want to be Queen? I don't know. A lot of back and forth on this record. Well-constructed songs, but very confused as to where they want to be stylistically. Having said that, production's better. There's more balls to this record, and even the songs that bugged me, the ballady type songs, they're still good songs. So yeah, number four for me on the chart for sure. Which leads us to 1979. We're leaving the 70s here with
one point. Sorry,
Yep,
Marty.
go ahead.
That we just should mention. Around the time of heading into Obsession, we talked earlier that there were issues building the band. Schenker technically left the band briefly before Obsession. That he was fed up and was going to be done with them. And it was actually Pete Way, the bassist, who got on the phone and really, worked him pretty hard to reel him back in and be like, come on, it's okay, it's all good, you don't want to do this, come on back, here boy, come on. Whatever he had to do, he did get Schenker back on board for Obsession and into Strangers of the Night cycle, but things were already kind of at their breaking point, and obviously it was going to happen again pretty soon, and Pete was not going to be able to bring him back in on board. So, but that kind of sets the stage. They go out, they do a bunch of tours, record stuff, and release it as this live album. So there you go. Sorry, Marty.
No, it's all right. 1979. We're sending off the 70s with this banger right here, "Strangers in the Night." Sue.
Okay, so it's obviously all of our favorite UFO album. It's also my favorite live album of all time. What's interesting is it was a live album that got me into heavier music to begin with. It was Kiss Alive,
Me
which
too.
I don't think had Beth on it.
No, it did not. That was pre-Beth. Yep.
Yeah.
I believe it was on Kiss Alive too, though. I'm sure it was.
Right.
It was a hit, so of course they were.
Almost had to be.
Yeah. milking that for sure.
But the Strangers in the Night album is just an absolutely flawless album from start to finish. I remember buying it at Tower Records in New York City when I was about 15, 16, and it was just something I've listened to like regularly throughout all of these years. I never stopped listening to it.
It's like a pair of jeans that fits just perfect.
That's right. That's right. And, we've already talked about all of the songs on it, but I think the main highlights are the live versions of Natural Thing, Dr. Doctor, Lights Out, Rock Bottom, Let It Roll, and Love to Love. So those are the highlights for me.
So where you ranking?
Well, number one, of course. But yeah, I mean, I wish I can't really think of what else to say about it, but it's just like, it's just been part of my soundtrack of my life for all of these years. So I think if I was to go on a desert island, this would be one that I would take with me.
Right. Nice. All right. Alan, Strangers in the Night.
Yeah. So, oddly, it sounds like weird to us today. Bands don't really do this kind of thing, but in the late 70s, you could release a live album and then go tour for the live album.
Because this is typically where band like Kiss was dead until Kiss Alive took off suddenly.
Yeah, and then you can go out and you could tour on the strength of Kiss Alive, and UFO could tour on the strength of Strangers in the Night. It's kind of weird in a way that this has become their most popular iconic album, and it's the live album, and it's at the end of their it's at the end of this era. Schenker doesn't really make it through the tour, and then changes would have to occur. This one, it's not just a fantastic UFO album. It is widely considered by UFO fans, hard rock fans, heavy metal fans, anybody who appreciates this style of music. It's considered one of the best live albums ever made, with good reason. People will throw some other names in that hat, of course. You've got Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. A lot of people will put up there with it. Kiss Alive.
No Sleep Till Hammersmith, Live
Yeah.
After Death. I
Yep.
mean,
There are other good ones. I think this one does eclipse a lot of
Made
people
Japan.
put Allman Brothers, Live at the Fillmore up there with this kind of
Worldwide
thing.
Live. Sorry, people are
Unleashed in the East.
Unleashed in the East.
Unleashed in the East. Yeah, no, that's one personally I would put up there on this tier.
Tokyo Tapes.
Tokyo Tapes from Scorpions. I'm not the biggest fan of Tokyo Tapes. I need to revisit it. Something about the track list on that just doesn't have some of the songs I want it to include. But this does, as Sue said, this is every UFO song you want to hear, and hearing them live, you really do, hear the power the band can deliver them with. There's a couple of versions of the album, so the track list is slightly different depending on what you get. If you have the original, it's 13 tracks and it starts with Natural Thing,
Right.
which is fantastic as far as I'm concerned, because again, it's got just that killer fucking power riff, and then the rhythm section comes in and just kicks ass. When they reissued it in what year was it? 99. They added 2 bonus tracks, and the track order is different.
Yeah, mine's different. Natural Thing is until track 5.
Yes, the reissue is what you tend to hear, and it starts with Hot and Ready into
Goes
Cherry.
Cherry, and then
Hot
Let It
and Ready
Roll.
works okay as an opener. I don't like Cherry that early in the track list, but to be fair, the reason they did this is that the track listing on the 1999 reissue more closely matches what the actual set list they were playing on the Strangers in the Night, tour era. So that's why they rearrange. Actually, it's the original version where the tracks were kind of rearranged. It's not the natural set list. The reissue at least does put things in the order the band wanted them in when they played live. And there's you can get some different packages of this. There's like 6 live CD version of Strangers in the Night that has several shows, I guess, leading up to the main ones where this was recorded. There's a show from Chicago and stuff in it, so you can kind of hear them working the kinks out of some of those songs just a little bit. Do you have that one, Sue?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I still haven't listened to all of the versions.
I can understand.
What's funny is that I like the original so much. It's kind of hard to listen to the other ones. So
yeah, I haven't picked up the 6 CD set for that very reason. I'm kind of like there's no way any of the other versions are going to top this.
Right.
And live recordings for me, I quickly get to a point. It's like, how many live recordings of very similar track lists do I need?
Right.
It's like, Iron Maiden and Candlemass, these bands that are putting out, for every one studio album, you get 3 live albums.
Yeah.
I just don't need all of that. There's only so many live versions of Die With Your Boots On I need. I passed that limit about 15 years ago. But yeah, everything about this album just works. The sound is great. The performances are dead on. The crowd noise interaction levels are very good. That's something that can be hard to get right on live albums. Sometimes you can't hear, it sounds like they're just playing to an empty audience or empty room. Other times you can't hear the band for people screaming. This one, everything's balanced.
Let's be honest,
really
70s, I mean, all live albums mostly are studio albums. They just are. I think Frampton Comes to Life, Comes Alive or whatever, I read that they used a bass drum and a bass line from the original footage. Kiss, you go listen to Kiss Alive 2 and you hear Paul Stanley singing in the background singers as Paul Stanley while he's singing it's like derp. Back then you don't think about it. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Alan. Go ahead.
No, it's a good point. Yeah,
it's all studio. It's all like Unleashed in the East, 100% studio record.
Yeah.
People push back on Unleashed in the East a lot. A lot of folks have said that really the only thing that got touched up with Unleashed. I mean, yes, they may have cleaned things up in the studio, but what band members have been saying in recent years for Unleashed in the East is that it's really only Halford's vocals that had to be worked on because he was sick as a dog for a couple of those shows in Japan, and so he sounded horrible. And those we've got one of the best vocalists out there. There's no reason to put out a live album where he's coughing up a lung.
Yeah.
But most of the rest of it is supposed to be, yes, the actual live sound. And that was the thing with Strangers in the Night for a long time too. This was always reported, as pretty much, the live sound, that it wasn't really tinkered with much in the studio. In more recent years, there's been more debate about that there may have been a little more touching up than people used to think there was on this album. But it still, really captures everything in that live environment just perfectly. And yeah, regardless of which version you get, the track list is, it's just loaded. Looking at the original track listing, yes, you've got Natural Thing, Out in the Street. Again, not personal favorite, but it should be on there. It's a fan favorite. Only You Can Rock Me, Doctor, Mother Mary, which, a little more of a deeper cut, but again, a good heavy one there. This Kids. the grammar. Love to Love, of course. Yeah. Amazing. Lights Out sounds great here. Kind of, the center point for me for the album is, Schenker's solo on Rock Bottom. They let that song, stretch out for a long time. It's on the original. It's clocking in here. I'm looking at it at 11 minutes and 8 seconds. And yeah, it's, it's the Schenker, showcase. And funnily enough, according to some of the other band members, at least, Schenker wasn't happy with the solo. It was one of the things he wanted to go in and touch up a little bit in the studio before the album came out. And they, whoever was, handling the production was just like, no, you don't need to. It's brilliant. Leave it. And they're just like, no, you're not fixing up a single thing. I'm thinking it was a Pete Way interview, just based on what I'm remembering. But Pete recalls, and maybe again, it's embellished, whatever. But yeah, he recalls like Schenker being very disheartened that they wouldn't allow him to touch up the solo a little bit, and that he, when they're just like, the foot is down, you're not touching it, go away. That Schenker left the studio, not kind of shaking his head, muttering to himself, "Poor Rock Bottom." Like he was just sad that the song wasn't going to be as good as it should be, or something. Well, it's considered one of the all-time great guitar solos in the history of hard rock. So apparently he thought he could do it better. That's a thing. What else have we got on here? You've got Too Hot to Handle, I'm a Loser, Let It Roll, Shoot. So yeah, and then the reissue added Cherry and Hot and Ready to the start. And again, there's some reordering of tracks to make it match the original actual live set list they were playing at the time. It's really hard to argue that it's not one of the definitive live albums of all time. I would put, for me personally, I would put Live After Death from Iron Maiden higher than it. I know some people, aren't as big on that because it's not Bruce's best vocal performance.
He's at the end of a long ass tour. His voice is roached.
It is, and it
cool,
doesn't, and it still sounds fucking amazing.
Yeah.
It doesn't bother me a lick. Unleashed in the East would be close to this tier for me. I think this is a lot better than Live and Dangerous. Live and Dangerous is another one I guess I need to revisit. I always felt like that album didn't sound nearly as good as it could have. Lynott was a bit notoriously uneven with live performances. He could be deadly live, and he could also just be kind of dead on stage some nights. Like probably depending on what he took before. I think it's much better than Live at Hammersmith. So yeah, for live albums, it's got to be in the conversation for me for best live album that I've ever heard. So yeah, an easy number one. I'll throw this out as a question to y'all. The fact that this is so good and so widely heralded is just not, it's like the perfect UFO track list and one of the perfect live albums. Does it keep people from investigating the band deeper? Because it feels like, well, if you got this, you really in a way do already have all the best stuff. Do you need all of this stuff? Is that one of the reasons maybe that people aren't as familiar with UFO? Just like,
yeah,
I bought the one. It's like those bands where you get the greatest hits albums. Like, well, I probably already have the best stuff, and I never check out the rest of them. What do you else think?
That it is basically the greatest hits album. They're just live versions of their greatest songs. So, That could definitely be a limiting factor. It's a shame though, because you would be missing out on a lot of good music if you did that.
Oh, I
But-
agree. Absolutely. I
But
think
it's
folks
their
should
one
check more out.
truly consistent album.
It is.
It really is. Yeah.
Mhm.
And for me, I'll just jump in here and get my 2 cents in on this.
Yes, go right ahead.
It's the 70s, live albums had a different lane. They were in a different lane. They were, like someone mentioned in the chat, the 70s live albums were more important, and they're it. Like I said, Kiss Alive saved Kiss. It captured, even though it wasn't in the studio, it wasn't live per se. It was still, it caught them in a raw element, and they picked great songs. I mean, this is essentially a greatest hits of UFO. This is the only album this week that I've listened to 3 times because it's so good. It's so good. It amazes me that they can look at their body of work and know what their best songs are, what would make a great live set, but they couldn't when they're writing the stuff. Song flow. I mean, none of their songs straight up suck. Maybe the first couple albums, they don't belong type of thing. But, from there, when Schenker enters the band, none of this is bad. It all kind of boils down to personal taste. And for me, they don't pace their records right. They just don't. They clump too many either mid-pace or ballad-esque type tracks. There's 1 or 2 tracks on here that are like that, but it works. It works within the flow of the song. They nailed it on this. Why couldn't they have nailed it on all their other records? I mean, and to answer your question, Alan, for me, as an outsider looking in, this to me is the UFO album you need. It just is. I mean, yeah, there's some great songs on all of these records, but this is a get in, get out, wash your hands of it type of thing. And I don't even, like I said, I bought this No Place to Run album. I know Schenker's not on it. I got it for $3. And, is this kind of like a Deep Purple thing? Do they kind of go into like this mellow type of vibe in the 80s? I have no idea. But
gradually they do, not immediately, but they
is this like their
slide
Perfect Strangers? Is this their Perfect Strangers album?
No.
No?
Not well, there's no break, Perfect Strangers feels more different because there's that long gap where the band had disbanded. With UFO, they kind of each album is kind of a step in that more AOR direction, but at least for the first 2 albums, they're not that, they're getting softer but gradually, I guess is the way to say it.
But the thing that's cool about this is it kind of is truly a greatest hits package. Yes, it's live, however live it is, I don't know, but you can't really tell because they don't really speed up the tracks. They're playing these tracks very authentically to the originals. There's no quicker tempo. There's no rougher vocals. There's no greatly off the charts different guitar solos. They are kind of playing it perfectly to the albums. So if you want to test the waters, for me, I think this is what you need. This is where you need to start. If you decide this rules and you're, collector scum, like most of us that are into this type of music, then you start branching out. But I mean, if this is the only album I had by them, knowing now what I know after listening to these albums this week, probably whenever it comes to this, I'm going to listen to this. So for me, it was my number 1 because they actually composed a track listing that held my attention for the duration of this record. So yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're going with any sort of topic there, Alan. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, you're fine. Yeah, but no. So that is it. After again, Schenker walks off tour. The band's had enough. They bring in Paul Chapman, and they venture into the 80s. And as Sue and I were talking about while Marty was having to reboot, things get more uneven. They gradually get softer.
I could tell.
We've brought it up on different topics before that a lot of those 70s hard rock bands had trouble transitioning into the 80s. They never quite found their footing. there are some exceptions, of course, but even the exceptions are often bands that like the Scorpions reinvent themselves a bit coming into the 80s. They become a hugely successful, but they're not doing the same thing they did in the 70s. Thin Lizzy was showing like they might make the transition well, but then they fell apart. Deep Purple come back, Perfect Strangers, has a lot of cool stuff on it.
It's a good album,
but it doesn't sound anything like Deep Purple from the 70s. They've modernized. Rush changes direction coming into the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Genesis, of course, reinvents themselves in the 80s. So, yeah. It's not something unique to UFO that they just couldn't cut it, or they couldn't find their voice in the 80s. Lots of those bands had trouble navigating even other well-established very prog bands like Yes were changing direction.
And when you see your singer starting to write more songs and they're very symphonic and show tuney, you kind of know that down the road, if that singer stays with your band, that's going to be a sticking point. They're just going to be like, look, I wrote this one song and I have things I want to say and do. And I could just tell that would be a direction this band. You say they get softer. I could tell that. I would bet the singer gets more involved in the songwriting.
Well, after a few albums, he's the only guy left. Is part of.
Well, there you go.
There
you go.
I mean,
it's the Mott
Schenker
show.
Off. Pete Way stays for a couple of albums, but then moves on to do Fastway, of course, with Eddie Clark, and then moves on to establish Wasted. So Andy Parker leaves somewhere along the line. So yeah, I mean, eventually it's kind of it's Phil Mogg and these guys. So yeah, I mean, in a way, he almost had to take over a lot of the songwriting duties. And when members started changing more frequently, even more so that it was kind of up to him to do something. But yeah, so we've covered it very well. Sue, any final thoughts for the discography?
Yeah, I think they would have benefited from a visionary producer, like somebody who would have taken them under his wing, like a Rick Rubin. Not that his production style would have fit them, but the way that he kind of did arrangements and steered bands into a tighter direction, like with Trouble and even Slayer, some of the other bands he worked with. If UFO had had somebody like that, I think they could have had more consistency in their albums.
It would have said, these are your this is your strong suit. All this other stuff you're doing, yeah, fine and dandy, but you're dipping into it too much. It's too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Again, I'll still push back against that some, Marty. For that era,
it
really wasn't. And if you go back and look at those Thin Lizzy albums, I mean, we've covered Thin Lizzy before, and you were very bullish on a lot of those albums. There's a lot of variation on those albums when you start picking them apart.
There is.
It's not all just hard-nosed rockers on those albums whatsoever.
But Phil Lynott, to me, had a much more charismatic and soulful voice. I mean, this Mogg guy, he's a good singer. Don't get me wrong, he's a great singer, but he's not Phil Lynott. He just isn't. It's not comparable to me anyway.
And one other point was that at no point did any of us ever mention drumming. Drumming is like the least important thing in this band. Like you don't even hardly notice that it's
Four
there.
on the floor. Yeah, you don't. You're right, 100%. I didn't once think, "Wow, what a cool fill." Never entered my wheelhouse. Yeah,
yeah. It's like the old Simpsons skit. Now, it wasn't about UFO, but it certainly could have been. It was about Grand Funk instead. But Homer's trying to convince the kids, like how the bands from his day were cool, and it's basically Homer being like the shreddy guitar solos of Michael Schenker, the world weary longing vocals of Phil Mogg, the perfectly adequate drumming of Andy Parker.
Yeah.
He follows that same pattern with the Grand Funk members.
Now, I was lucky enough to see the Walk on Water tour with Schenker, the whole classic lineup. But if I remember correctly, I have to try to find out if this was right. I think Cozy Powell was playing drums on that tour.
Rest in peace, Cozy Powell. Yeah.
And of course, he's always phenomenal.
He is a great drummer. Rainbow Rising, come on.
Yeah, come on.
Wow.
Did you get to see them again on the Covenant tour, Sue? Or
no, unfortunately, I didn't. Yeah.
The confident drumming of Don Brewer.
Yeah, that's that. Yeah, Homer does it with Grant. He's trying to convince Bart and Lisa that like your Grand Funk Railroad, was like still the hit.
They live
happening
around
to
here
listen
in
to.
Traverse City. Yeah.
Oh, do they? Cool.
Yeah.
I want to say it's the Simpsons episode where Homer ends up joining Lollapalooza, but I might be wrong. He basically, again, to try to make himself cool to the kids, he ends up becoming an act on Lollapalooza where they like shoot a cannon. Instead, he's the cumin cannonball, but he's the target for the cannon. And they keep shooting him in the belly with like a giant cannon, and he just takes the hit. But yeah, he's all about pushing Grand Funk. It's a fun episode because yes, you've got like Peter Frampton and Homer messes up his giant inflatable pig thing and everything and such. But yeah, you're right, Sue. The rhythm section, is not the highlight of this band. They're functional. They do what they need to. Pete Way, was larger than life in terms of personality, not necessarily in terms of bass playing talent.
And his pants, which influenced Iron Maiden significantly.
Yep. Yeah, and like you said, Steve Harris's favorite band, and when you listen to tracks, like Lights Out, where it's got a little bit of that gallop to it, you can very easily see a young Steve Harris thinking, how exactly do I play that part on a bass?
Right.
And there you go. So the influence of the band should not be overlooked or underestimated. If you like any heavy metal band from the 1980s, you owe a tip of the hat to UFO. There's a pretty good chance that statement will hold up for almost any band. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us. It was really fun. Sue brought this up as a topic quite a while back. It just has been a while before we got it rotated in, but it's been a good one to dive through.
Do you have any closing thoughts on them before we jump, Alan?
I think I've covered it pretty well. Spoiler, I don't think we'll be doing a part 2 to cover the 80s, 90s, and 21st century era of UFO.
I might be sick that day.
I have to say, though, the Walk on Water album is just as good as any of the ones we talked about today. And it has a 2-word title, Knock Knock. So.
It absolutely does. Yep. Yes, Walk on Water has some really cool stuff on it. How is Covenant? Now, I've actually not heard that one.
I don't care for Covenant or Sharks.
Okay.
Neither one are really worth your time. So
fair enough. Yeah. Yeah. There are some, again, like The Wild, The Willing, and The Innocent. If folks want to hear what they were doing in the early 80s, that's a decent album to check out. There's nothing embarrassing about it. But when there's no reason to, I don't think, for us to ever try to sift through all of that material. For fans of it, that's great. They've more or less been able to keep things going, with some starts and some stops over the years. I've got one of their much later albums, and it's decent, for what it is. They're a little bit similar to Deep Purple in my mind for what they've done over the past few decades. They're never going to make another No Heavy Petting, and they're never going to make another Force It. Deep Purple's never going to make another Machine Head, but they still chug along okay.
They're actually not a band anymore. They've officially disbanded.
Oh, at what point did they call it quits, Sue? Do you know?
Just recently. They had an auction of their equipment.
Wow,
so
that's
serious, like saying that's it. Yeah.
Well, for me, I would say that I was really looking forward to this because, like I said, I wanted to come to Jesus moment, like I had with Thin Lizzy. I had it with Scorpions. I love the 70s era of the Scorpions. I love them up through Love at First Sting. After that, I need some more. I've kind of lost touch with it. I know it's a lot more commercial, but the Uli John Roth era is amazing. And I kicked myself for missing out on it. So I was hoping that with, I was at a record show a couple weeks ago with my kid, and I saw a lot of old UFO records there. I'm like, I'm just going to wait until I listen to them before I buy these because no records are cheap anymore. You just can't go and buy a 1970s record for $10. You have to pay $40 for it, of course, even though it looks like it was slid down a road and pissed on by a bum. I'm glad we did this. It was a lot of fun. It was a cool exploratory mission, and I was kind of surprised where I landed on this stuff. I anticipated to be a little bit more enamored at the end of it, but I'm not there yet. So it was cool. It was a cool mission, and thanks for picking it, Sue. Of course.
And then some of that, Marty, might just be that with it being newer to you. I wouldn't be surprised if you spent some time with some of these albums that you started to kind of wrap your head around them a bit more.
Yeah.
It took me a little while with UFO. Like it wasn't something I put on and immediately loved every track I was hearing. So because like you said, yeah, there are different things going on the albums. And there's no album that I like every song on. Yeah, they don't have a perfect album other than maybe Strangers in the Night, which is cheating when you put together your live set. But a cool band with a cool place in history.
Right on.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun talking about UFO, a band that all of the Metal Maniacs readers know how much I always love them. So thanks, everyone. And I look forward to shifting gears a little bit with the Nocturnus review. So
Hell yeah.
you'll see me stepping outside of my comfort zone a little bit, but with a band that I really like a lot. So.
Cool. I'm looking forward to what you have to say about that one. The last album was interesting. It didn't have a lot of staying power for me. I liked it at first, but then I shelved it and haven't played it since. So I'll be definitely looking forward to checking out your review of the new Nocturnus.
Absolutely.
And again, thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. Sorry, I haven't been active in the chat tonight. If you came in later, I said it earlier, but yeah, my computer's just acting up tonight, so I couldn't easily chat and keep the video feed going at the same time. So, but thanks for participating. There's been a lot of good comments. Glad some folks have enjoyed the show. Marty, anything you want to close with?
Just some show notes. We've got a Pentagram review coming up on Monday with Brain Smasher. Old Ben will be up doing that.
The Chilean Pentagram.
Yeah, the Chilean Pentagram. I've got a review I hope to shoot this weekend. It'll be coming out at some point. Wednesday, Ben is joining us. And we're going to be covering the first Seth album. It's in French, so I'm not going to say it.
Okay.
And then next Friday, Dwayne Lazarus will be on. What are we doing, Alan?
We are doing sort of a weird, different version of Keep or Reap. In this particular case, we are going through the Iron Maiden catalog, not for albums, but for songs. We're each going to get to put together a track list, our own personal best of Iron Maiden
mixtape,
our Iron Maiden greatest hits mix CD. You get to pick about 80 minutes of Iron Maiden songs, and the rest of the songs you never get to hear again. So, but we're not throwing songs at one another. We're each going to build our own track list. And
I didn't. Okay, wait a minute.
What we were going to
wait a minute. I didn't know that there was a never hear again aspect. I thought we were just making what we thought would be a great mixtape.
You should have read the fine print in the contract.
Guys are stupid. Dumb ideas. I don't like any of them. But one thing we're going to try to do at the end of it will be myself, Alan, of course, and Dwayne Lazarus. I'm going to try to make each of our playlists up as a Spotify playlist. So after the show's done, there will be a Spotify link. Hopefully, I might have to have my kids show me how to do this. Unfortunately, I'll share the link so you can go listen to our playlists when we're all said and done, and I may even have everybody vote on them too. So
yeah,
that'll be interesting too. Something fun, a little bit more social media BS that we suck at. So
yeah, we each basically have to dig through Iron Maiden's entire catalog and pick enough songs to fill one 80-minute CD, and we're not allowed anything beyond that. So yeah, we'll see what we each come up with, and where there's some overlap and where there's going to be some disagreements. Should be very fun. It's something we wanted to try out as a different way to approach a band's catalog. So hopefully we'll see everybody then. And Sue, hopefully we'll see you again soon too. It's always a lot of fun getting to chat with you.
Always fun having you on. Don't hang up. We'll chat for a minute afterwards.
All right.
Cheers, everybody. Y'all rule. Thank you so much for joining us. And to all the people at the Milwaukee Metal Fest. Hope you're having fun leaving us here. Anyway, cheers, everyone. We'll see you.
Bye.